Hey, what's up, Flatirons? We are so glad that you're with us. My name's Jesse, and then I've got somebody to introduce to us. This is Brad Ricka. He's our new West Campus pastor. And Adam, who is our old West Campus pastor, he's going to plant a church in Arkansas, and we're so proud of him. And Flatirons, just so you know, every time that you give here, part of what you give here is actually supporting church plants like that. It's supporting Adam. We're so grateful for the way that you're faithful with giving. But Brad, I just want to help introduce everybody to you as our West Campus pastor. So tell us about your family.
Yeah, sure, Jesse. So I'm married to Kim. Been married over 22 years. And over those years, we came here from Kentucky last year.
That's a good place.
It is a good place, yeah. We do miss it, although we love Colorado. We have 4 kids. We have 2 teenagers at home now, Elijah and Sarah Jane, and then 2 younger ones, Ezekiel and Solideo.
Dude, that's awesome. And like to move your family from Kentucky to Colorado, I mean, we've done that. That's a big move. What was it about the opportunity or Flatirons that just made you go like, man, I'm willing to move my family out for that?
Yeah, so I love the mission of the church at large. I love how we say it at Flatirons about bringing the awesome life of Christ to a lost and broken world. But the people and the culture of Flatirons is really special. And so I knew a lot of people on staff, and I knew a lot of people that call Flatirons home before we ever came out here. I love the way that we embrace radical grace with truth.
Yes.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's so good. And so good. And you're out here from Kentucky to Colorado, God's favorite state. What's your favorite thing to do in Colorado?
There's so much, and this sounds cliche, I guess, maybe, but I do love hiking, but it's that moment when I turn a corner on a trail I haven't been on before, and I see something beautiful, and it never ceases to amaze me how wonderful this state is. I mean, it's awesome. For sure.
We love Colorado, too. Well, we got 2 announcements for you, Flatirons, today, this weekend, and so, Brad, why don't you tell them the first announcement?
Yeah, for sure. So, Flatirons, there's been a lot of questions about the future, like when might we reopen? There's been some transition with our staff, and so as you all have emailed in and asked questions, we want to respond to that. Jim recorded a video. You can get to that on the homepage of our website. Check that out.
No, that's awesome. And then the other announcement that I've got for you, if you missed it last week, we are launching our app. It's on the App Store, the iPhone App Store, and then the Google Play, whatever it's called. I don't really know. You can get the app. It's the best way to stay connected to Flatirons. You can get on there and you can give, you can watch services, you can check out the staff and see how to contact. So it says Brad Ricka and West Campus pastor.
It's legit. I'm real, right?
They should have let us announce it. And if you type in Jesse, it says Executive Pastor of Experience. What does that even mean?
I don't know, but I love that title. I'm coming after you.
No, dude. Well, Flatirons, we're so grateful that you're with us. Make sure to check out that video after services. Check out that video on the website and go get the app. Ben's going to kick off week 2 of our series, Survival 101. But before that, let's worship.
Thanks for joining us today.
It was my turn. generations of every nation of kingdom come. So don't let your heart be in trouble. Hold your head up high, don't fear no evil. Fix your eyes on this one truth: God is madly in love with you. So take courage, hold on, be strong. Remember where our help comes from. Jesus, His kingdom come. Time that I look in the mirror, all these lines on my face are getting clearer. The past is gone. It went back. I dust at dawn. Isn't that the way? Everybody's got their dues in life to pay. My lives in books, written pages, live and learn from fools and from sages. You know it's true. All the things that come back to you. Sing with me, sing for the years, sing for the laughter, sing for the tears. Sing it with me, if it's just for today. Maybe tomorrow the good Lord will take you away.
All right. Now, I know what you're thinking, and you're thinking that the fact that this noise is in the background is a mistake, but it's not. It's on purpose. Before this, the band was like, how do we transition out of this Aerosmith song into your talk? And we got our heads together. We came up with a plan. This is about the only time in my life I'll ever be able to do this, and they're indulging me. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's one of the more ridiculous things I've ever been a part of here. Hey, welcome to Flatirons Online. Yes, we are a church. Yes, we are maybe losing our minds right now, but at least you get to tune in and watch it unfold. So, hey, my name is Ben. I'm the teaching pastor here. I want to welcome you to week 2 of this series that we're calling Survival 101. All right, this is a 3-week series where we're looking at the book of Philippians. It's a letter written by a guy named Paul in the New Testament. And Philippians is like the survival guide to having unshakable joy. All right, unshakable joy. Joy no matter what life throws at us. Joy even in the midst of hardship. And in light of a year, 2020, that just kind of keeps dragging on, I think it's a safe bet that we could all use a little more joy in our lives. And so we're digging into Philippians to pick up some practical tips that Paul gives us, tips for how to live your life in a way that gives you the best shot at joy regardless of your circumstances. If you missed last week, I'd recommend that you go back and watch it after this because we laid a lot of the groundwork for the rest of the series. But for right now, there's really only one thing that you need to know or remember from last week so that we can just kind of keep going. And it's this: what am I talking about when I use the word joy? All right, and biblical joy, as Paul understands it in the book of Philippians, is this: joy is a deep feeling in the soul that comes from knowing that Jesus is still at work in our lives and in our world. All right, so joy is a feeling deep in the soul. It's a good feeling. All right, but it's deeper and more foundational and more unshakable than just a fleeting, giddy sense of happiness or something, right? It's better than I feel joyful because I ate a good meal. It's deeper than that. And the feeling, it comes from knowing that Jesus is still at work in our lives and in our world, meaning joy is the result of a mindset, what we choose to know and learn about and think about and reflect on. That's why Paul can command people to be joyful even when times are tough. Because according to Paul, joy is not an emotion that's tied to your circumstances, whether your day is going well or not. Instead, according to Paul, joy is an emotion that is the result of a mindset, and you can choose a mindset. Both Paul and Jesus are on the same page here. We can't always control our circumstances, but we can control our outlook and our mindset when our circumstances suck. And the right mindset can even lead us to joy in the midst of hardship. So last week we talked about what joy is and isn't. We also talked about how to have a feeling of safety and security even in turbulent times. I'm not going to recap that. You'll just have to go back and watch it. But for today, I want to jump into another piece of this mindset that Paul claims leads to joy. And to do that, I want to share a quick story with you. All right, so I recently took a few weeks off of work to spend some time with the family. And we didn't travel or go anywhere, which is fine by us because we live in Colorado, right? This place is amazing. This is the kind of place that other people fly to and visit for their vacations. And so we just took full advantage of the mountains while I was off of work. I mean, there was maybe one day where we kind of lazed around the house, but the rest of our days were filled with fishing and camping and hiking and just being outside, which was all mostly amazing, except for one day. All right, one day we get up early and we head out to El Dorado Canyon to do some hiking in that area. Up until this moment, we've already done some pretty tough hikes with our kids. And so Emery and Micah, who are 7 and 5, they'll get whiny every now and then about how their legs hurt or whatever, but overall they do great. All right, and then Chloe, my 2-year-old, she just chills in my backpack and talks my ear off the whole time. And so we're headed out to El Dorado Canyon. There's some trickier hikes that I want to do in the area. But every time we pull over to one of these trailheads, the parking lots are completely full. I think that everyone and their brother right now is like, get me out of my house. And so the trails are all completely packed. So after striking out a few times, I jump on this app I have for trails. I'm looking through trails in the area. And every single trail in the area is either A, the kind of trail that I enjoy, which is like basically a punishing exercise in endurance, which the kids can't do, or they're basically super easy flat strolls through a field. Not my favorite. But at the same time, like, I don't want to spend 30 minutes driving to a completely different area where the parking lots are probably going to be full anyway. And so we just decide on doing a trail that is a super easy flat stroll through a field. And I'm feeling good about it. Right? It's only 4.5 miles long. It's basically flat the entire way. Great views of the Front Range. It's not going to be the most challenging hike, but at least the kids won't struggle with it, right? Wrong. Like, so wrong. Because while the hike was technically easy, it's also directly in the sun for all 4.5 miles of this thing. There's like zero shade. And it's one of those days that's like somehow 180 degrees outside in Colorado. And so the first mile, everyone's doing fine. The second mile, the kids start complaining about how they're hot. By the third mile, we're like really starting to lose these little people. They're hot. They're starting to get sunburns. They're running out of water. They're tired. And right when we have about a mile left of this hike, my son Micah just comes completely uncorked. If you're a parent with little kids, you might know what I'm talking about. It's like they hit this emotional tipping point, right? So they're whining and whimpering, just like tips into full-blown, like literally inconsolable sobbing. It's almost like they make a decision to do it in their heads. Like Micah's like, okay, I'm going to act like a crazy person starting right now. And he's a total mess, right? Hot, tired, sunburnt, out of water. He's miserable, and he's definitely letting us know. He's just screaming, crying, throwing a fit. All right, the thing that was so frustrating, though, is that we're stuck, right? I mean, there's only one solution, right? The solution is we have to keep hiking for one more mile. You know, I tried explaining that to Micah, of course, but he's like on a different emotional planet, right? He's not going to hear logic and reason right now, and so we're stuck. You can't turn around and go back. That would just take longer than pressing on and finishing the hike. And we can't, like sit and take a long break and hope he chills out from his maniacal tantrum because he's just going to get hotter and more sunburn. Like the only thing Micah can do to fix his problem is press on. Right? He can't turn around, can't stand still. He's got to keep going. He's got to hike that very last mile if he wants to get to shade and water and the air-conditioned car. Which, to his credit, he did. He finished the hike. But I'm telling you, it was the longest mile I have ever hiked in my entire life. He screamed and he cried the entire way. Allie and I, unfortunately, are just getting increasingly more angry. Emery, our daughter's even begging him to stop. Everybody's losing it except for Chloe, who's just chilling in my backpack, talking my ear off about a flower that she picked. She's oblivious. Eventually, though, we finished the longest mile of my life. We finished the hike. And of course, again, if you're a parent of a little kid, you know what this is like. It's like the second Micah gets into the shaded, air-conditioned car, it's over. He goes from like DEFCON 1 meltdown to just like, all right, cool. So what are we thinking for dinner? Like, good hike, good day. Just over. Here's why I tell that story. It's this. Micah struggled with that hike for 2 reasons. All right, 2 reasons. It was difficult, and there was a delay in success. Let me explain that. So it's difficult for his little legs, right? His little legs hiking 4.5 miles in direct heat and sunlight. It's difficult. There's also delay in success. It's taking longer than he wants it to take. And that's something that I don't just see in Micah's life. I see it in my own life. I see it a lot in my parenting lately. Right, because having a 7 and a 5 and a 2-year-old during like the cursed and claustrophobic year of 2020 has not been easy. It's been difficult. And then there's delay in success. Like why aren't these kids just like mature, logical adults yet? Why can't they get a job and contribute and stop whining about Go-Gurt or whatever? Focusing on the difficulty and the delay in success, it's led to joyless and irritable parenting in my life. Maybe you see it in your life too. This is why, as a random example, some of us cut corners at work, right? Because the job, it's not our favorite. It's difficult. We got passed up for the promotion, so that's, delay in success. And so we eventually reach a place where we're like, screw it. I'll do the least amount of work possible in order to keep my paycheck. That approach to a career will be a joyless one. When we become overwhelmed with the difficulty or delay in success, we start giving up. Right? We start giving up on our marriage or our dream of being married in the first place. We start giving up on our physical health or our mental health. We start giving up on the dream that life will go back to pre-COVID normal. The difficulty and delay in success, just like Micah on his hike, brings us to a place where we just want to give up. And that's actually something that Paul understood in his letter to the Philippians, this survival guide to having unshakable joy. He understood the temptation to tap out and give up, and he understood that giving up leads to a joyless life. And so I want to take a look at that together right now. In Philippians 3:12 through 16, Paul uses a sports metaphor to talk about this concept, which I love about Paul. I love that Paul talks sports. All right? I'm one of those geeky guys who, I believe that baseball is the greatest game ever devised by humanity. I think that, every metaphor you need for life can be found between home plate and the center field bleachers. I think if Paul lived long enough to see baseball, he would agree. But he didn't. He did. And so instead, he talks about running. Right? Makes sense. The Olympic Games are a big deal at the time. Everyone thought about it and talked about it. And so Paul compares our lives to running a race. That was a comparison that people would have latched onto quickly back in his time. So let's jump into this running a race metaphor that Paul uses in Philippians 3. All right, he starts by saying this. He says, "Not that I have already obtained all this or have already been made perfect." All right, quick timeout. In the paragraph before this, Paul talks about chasing after, running after a righteousness. Like a spiritual goodness that comes from putting your faith in Jesus instead of coming from checking off all the check boxes that you need to in your religious life. We tend to think that way. I just got to go to church, tuck my shirt in, and stop cussing, and only watch Kirk Cameron movies, and then God will like me, and I'll be happy. Paul says no. All right, that won't lead to righteousness, spiritual security, spiritual goodness. He says putting our faith in Jesus will lead to righteousness. And he says that kind of righteousness will result in becoming more and more like Jesus. So that's what he's referencing. Back to our sports metaphor. Paul says, not that I have already obtained all this or have already been made perfect. Right? So I'm not saying I'm already like Jesus or that I have every aspect of this righteousness, this spiritual goodness, in my possession and locked down. I'm not perfect. But I press on. And I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. So Paul says, I'm running, all right? I'm running after this righteousness, this goodness of life that comes from believing in Jesus and becoming more and more like him. And even though I'm not there yet, I'm going to keep pressing on. I'm going to press on to take hold of that better kind of life. And then he says this next. He says, brothers, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it. So again, a second reminder, I'm not perfect. I'm not there yet. But one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. See, Paul says that life, the spiritual life, is like a race. When you put your faith in Jesus, there is this prize waiting for you at the finish line. It's guaranteed for you, right? Jesus won it for you. The prize is a lot of stuff. The prize is becoming more and more like him. The prize is a better life in the here and now. The prize is a perfect and eternal life after we die. But the prize has been won. Jesus won it for us on the cross. It's guaranteed. But the rest of our life, according to Paul, in the here and now, is pressing on toward that goal. As a theme you see Paul talk a lot about in the New Testament. The rest of our lives is a marathon race where we are slowly like widening the gap between who we are and who we used to be, while also closing the gap between who we are and who Jesus designed us to be. Life is a race where we're pressing on toward the goal, the prize that Jesus promised us. And we're pressing on regardless of the fact that life is hard and difficult and the success is delayed. Like Paul said multiple times, I'm not there yet. I'm not perfect, but I'm pressing on. See, according to Paul, this life requires perseverance. And the dictionary definition of perseverance is this: it's persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. It's not giving up, not giving in. No matter how hard it gets, you keep going, you keep pressing on. That's perseverance. Paul says this life requires perseverance because it's going to be hard. And the ultimate success, like being completely, finally made perfect, is delayed. Like you're never going to completely have that prize in your hands until the moment you die. Now, this concept of perseverance, all right, that life is a race and you can't give up on it, Paul talks about that in a different letter that he writes too. In his letter to the Corinthians, he uses the same metaphor to teach the same exact point. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's pretty much the same thing we just read. To summarize it, to the Corinthians, he says, hey guys, again, life is a race. All right, and Jesus has already won the prize for us. So we shouldn't run like losers. We're not losers. We should run like winners. We should go into strict training for this kind of a race, and we should run it like we know that we're getting the prize. And then at the end, he says this, and this is what I want to zoom in on. He says, therefore, because of all this stuff I said about life being a race, therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. Paul says, because the prize is guaranteed, I don't run like a loser. I'm not one. How does a losing runner approach a race? He approaches it aimlessly. And that word right there is what ties us back into the Philippians verses that we already read. See, in Corinthians, Paul says that a losing runner runs aimlessly. And in Philippians, Paul says a winning runner runs by forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. A winning runner is focused. He's got his sights set on the goal. When you combine those two letters to get kind of a fuller picture of what Paul thinks about the race of life, you realize that according to Paul, there are two ways to run this race. All right? You can run aimlessly or you can run with perseverance. And one of those approaches will lead to joy, and the other approach will lead to joylessness. And let's be honest with ourselves. Like, how many of us are running aimlessly? We would just describe our lives as aimless. You know, it's like we don't really know like where we should be directing our energy. We don't really know what the goal is. And so we're just kind of wandering through life, surviving day to day. Is that bringing you any joy? I doubt it. When we run aimlessly, we start to look like Micah on that miserable hike. He asked to turn around a lot because he didn't realize that that would be worse than just pressing on. He didn't realize it would be worse to turn around and face the past. He also asked to sit still and not go anywhere a lot. But that's just going to prolong reaching the finish line. He was aimless, and it was prolonging his joylessness. When we're aimless, we do the opposite of what Paul says a winning runner does. For example, instead of forgetting what is behind, we start to hyper-focus on what is behind. When we're aimless, we start beating ourselves up over and over again about stuff that's in our past, stuff that Jesus said is forgiven. We start convincing ourselves that our past defines the rest of our race, and we just can't get past it. So we start telling ourselves stuff like, I'm just a liar. I'm just a cheater. I'm an addict. I'm just lazy or abused or unlovable, and that's all I'll ever be. And then if unchecked, that mindset eventually leads to backwards momentum. Because if you tell yourself enough times that this is all I'll ever be, we start believing it, and so we start returning to it. Just like the proverb in the Bible says, there's a proverb that says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so fools repeat their folly. We start lying and cheating or using again, fill in the blank, because we've convinced ourselves that's just who we are and there's no escaping it. But that's not who you are. That's who you were. In fact, in another chapter of Corinthians, Paul says just that. Paul says, give me the list. All right, give it to me. All right, give me the list of all the awful things that you think you are based on the things that you've done in the past. Give me the list. And then after reading off the list, Paul says this. He goes, okay, I'll give it to you. Yes, that is what some of you were. But you were washed, and you were sanctified, and you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and by the Spirit of God. Paul says that if you've put your faith in Jesus, you are free to forget what is behind you, only because Jesus has forgiven what is behind you. You are now free to press on and persevere and strain toward what is ahead, because here's the truth. You simply can't run forward, move on with your life, if you're facing the wrong direction. If you're focused on the past, hyper-focusing on the past, it leads to joylessness. It's a joy killer. Here's one more characteristic of running aimlessly, and then we'll move on. Paul says that a winning runner strains toward the goal ahead. And so I think that a losing runner, a runner who's running aimlessly, they simply just get upset that they're not already at the goal. Again, it's just like Micah on the hike. He's so mad that he's not already in the shaded, air-conditioned car that he just wants to sit down and quit. But that's shooting himself in the foot, because the only way to get to the car is to strain on, strain ahead, and press on toward the goal. We do that all the time, though, right? We look at our personal lives or our spiritual growth or our marriages or our singleness or our careers or our educations, you name it, and we're like the classic kid on the road trip in the back of the van, just whining, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? I do this all the time. Again, in my current phase of life, my current phase of life is just consumed by parenting, and that's where I see it a lot. No exaggeration, I will catch myself literally thinking stuff like, why is my 2-year-old so messy? And why does she throw tantrums when she's tired? And why can't she ever understand what I'm saying to her? I know that's a ridiculous line of thought because she's 2, but I'm still thinking it. And it's all because I want to be at the finish line now, right? I want progress now. I want to know whether or not I did a decent job of parenting, and I want to know it now. And before you roll your eyes at me, how many of us have done the same thing? Right? This is why marriage threw us for a loop, as an example. Because we didn't expect it to be hard. No one told us it was going to be hard. We thought it was going to be like honeymoon phase, starting at the honeymoon for the next 60 years of our marriage. Or we didn't realize that love is less of an emotion, and it's more of a choice and a commitment that we're going to have to make day in and day out, especially on the days that we don't really like each other. We just thought we'd feel warm and fuzzy every single day. Whether it's parenting or marriage, our careers, you name it, we've convinced ourselves that we would see the finish line a lot sooner. We didn't know. We didn't know this would take a lifetime of straining towards the goal. And so the temptation becomes to just sit down and quit. Because in 21st century America, we hate delayed gratification. But do you remember the dictionary definition of perseverance? It is persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. We are not there yet. Paul stressed that multiple times. I'm not there yet. I'm not perfect yet, because life is a marathon race. It is an exercise in gaining small amounts of ground day by day. We won't be at the finish line tomorrow, and we can't convince ourselves of that, or we'll just sit down and quit. We'll start running aimlessly, and it won't lead to joy. So what's the better way? All right, what is the survival tool for unshakable joy, joy regardless of our circumstances, that we see in Philippians today? Well, the survival tool for today is this: we got to run with perseverance, which means forget what is behind and press on towards the goal. If life is like a race, then Paul says it's all about forward momentum. Right? Don't turn around and face the wrong direction. Don't hyper-focus on your past. Your past is forgiven. Your past no longer defines the rest of your race. In fact, I would say this: you and I should only look behind us. We should only look to our past for as long as it takes to say, wow, right? Look how far we've come. Look how far Jesus has brought us on this race. And then after that brief encouragement, turn around and look forward and press on towards the goal. Forget what's behind and press on towards the goal. At the same time, don't be disappointed that you're not there yet. The way we say it around here is growth takes time. Whether that's your marriage, your sense of identity, your spiritual growth takes time. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Keep your eyes on the prize, but don't be disappointed that you're not there yet. Paul says that that's what it looks like to run this race of our life with perseverance. The question, though, is still, how does that lead to joy? And that's how I want to end this thing. Here's one of the main ways that I think running our lives with perseverance will lead to joy. And it's this: if we can forget what is behind, right? Understand that our past is in the past and is forgiven. And if we can press on towards the goal without getting disappointed that we're not there yet, if we can run with perseverance, it means we can be content with where we are at in the race right now. Because it means you're not disappointed with who you used to be. And it means you're not disappointed with who you want to be, but you aren't yet. It means we can be content with where we currently are in the race today. Which is actually how Paul ends this race metaphor of his in Philippians. After all that good stuff that we talked about, life is a race, so forget what's behind and strain toward what is ahead. After all of that good stuff, Paul says this. He says, all of us who are mature should take such a view of things. So if you're spiritually mature, you will see life as a marathon race. And then he says, and if on some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you. And I love that because Paul takes a slight dig at know-it-all Christians right there, which he does a lot. Basically, he tells us, listen, there's going to be some know-it-all Christians who disagree with me, all right? They're going to tell you that you should beat yourself up for your past, and they're going to tell you that you should be closer to the finish line than you are right now. But eventually, God will make that clear for all the know-it-alls, so don't let it get to you. And then he ends by saying this. He says, only let us live up to what we have already attained. And I love that. Because here's what that means. It basically means you and I are only being held accountable for where we are in the race right now, today. It means that God knows what lies in store for you in your race from start to finish. He's not holding you accountable for your past. It's forgiven. He's also not frustrated that you're not further along already because he's not stupid. He knows that you can't live up to, be held accountable to, a stretch of the race that you haven't reached yet. Here's the best way I could think to briefly explain this idea. All right, like I mentioned last week, I just got into fly fishing for the first time this summer. I'm obsessed. I love it. I'm sad that I went 33 years of my life without it. All right, but when I started, I caught like 2 or 3 fish, but mostly I'm losing flies left and right. They would just come off when I'm casting, or a fish would rip it off of my line. I'm still having a blast. I'm just not catching fish. Eventually, I realized that I'm tying the fly to my line with the wrong knot. And so I go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, right? And I learn to tie the knot. I practice it over and over again at my house. And what do you know? I start catching more fish. A few questions. Should I beat myself up for the fact that I did not know that knot in the past? No, that would be silly, right? I just didn't know what I didn't know. I'm new to this. I'm learning and I'm growing. Another question, should I ignore what I've learned and go back to tying the wrong knot? No, that would be silly. I want to catch fish. And if I want to do that, I have to learn from my past without returning to it. Last question, should I be frustrated that I'm not already a world-class fly fishing guide? No, that would be silly because I'm just not there yet. That kind of growth takes time. That kind of growth takes a lifetime. See, without realizing it, my approach to fly fishing is how I should be approaching my life in general. It's Philippians 3:16. I'm only living up to the information and experience that I've already attained. I'm not beating myself up for the past. I'm not returning to it. And I'm also not disappointed that I'm not an expert yet. And you know what the result has been? The result has been that I absolutely love fly fishing. I'm better than I used to be, and I know that I will be better than I am now in the future. But for right now, I'm really content to just get in the river and fish with my current level of expertise and knowledge. Paul tells us that all of us who are mature will take such a view of these things. We'll approach our lives in the same way. We'll learn from our pasts, but we won't return to our pasts. And we'll learn and we'll grow while also understanding that growth takes time. We will only hold ourselves accountable to what we have already attained in this life. And the result will be we can be content with where we are at in the race today. You aren't who you used to be, and that's fantastic. And you aren't yet the kind of person that Jesus will grow you into in the future. That's fantastic, because it means that you can forget what's behind you and press on towards what is ahead and do both of those things while remaining content with where we currently are in the race. And it really is just like that Aerosmith song that we played at the beginning of this thing. The lyrics to that, the past is in the past, and maybe tomorrow, like you don't know, maybe tomorrow the good Lord will take you away. So for right now, we can really just kind of sing for today and dream on. Be content with where you are today and press on. If that idea of just being content with where you currently are in the race today, if that sounds good, then let me throw out a challenge for this week, and then I'm going to pray. See, if we want to be content with where we currently are in the race today, we do need to know where we currently are in the race. And so the challenge is this: at some point this week, take some time to reflect on this race that you've been on in life. If you journal, journal. All right, I'm not a big journal guy. Lately, I've been doing my best, like thinking and praying and reflecting while fly fishing. So I'm going to go fly fishing this week and reflect. But at some point this week, reflect on this race of life, and specifically, reflect on these three things, all right? You take pictures of this if you're a forgetful person like I am. Reflect on these three things. Reflect on the past, all right? Am I a different person than I used to be? And how has Jesus changed me over time? And how far have I come in this race? And then reflect on the future. All right? In what ways do I hope that Jesus continues to change me? And how might I be able to play a role in pressing on toward that goal? And then reflect on the present and really just be thankful for it. Jesus, thank you for bringing me this far. And Jesus, thank you for where you're going to take me in the future. And Jesus, thank you for where I'm at in the race right now. Be content with where you're at in the race right now. And if you're one of those people who's like, I'm not really good at, making time to reflect on stuff like that, that's okay. All right, because I'm going to pray, and then our worship team is going to play 2 songs. Right? The first short song is all about what Jesus has done for our past, and the second song is all about what we can count on in our future because of Jesus. So you can take the next few minutes right now to reflect on this race of life. If you sing, sing. Right? If you don't, just listen to the words and reflect. And then next weekend, we'll all gather together again virtually, and we'll keep learning about this unshakable joy that we can count on through Jesus. But for now, let's learn to be content with where we're at in the race. I'm going to pray. And today's prayer is just Hebrews 12, 1-3. So pray with me. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, we're surrounded by people dead and alive just cheering us on and encouraging us. Because of that, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles and trips us up. And instead, let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the goal, the author and perfecter of our faith, the pace setter for this race, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. Consider him, consider Jesus, who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you and I will not grow weary and lose heart. God, please teach us what it looks like to learn from our past but not return to it. And God, teach us what it looks like to set our eyes on the goal but not be disappointed that we're not there yet. And then God, teach us what it looks like to be content right now with where you've brought us in this race. And we pray this in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen.
In so strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. I know the night won't last. Your word will come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. You've never failed me yet.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this week. Go to our homepage and check out Jim's video for updates of what's going on here at the church. We love you. Have an incredible week. We'll see you next weekend.